For those that don't know me, my name is Lori Power. My company is MP Benefits, and I'm a group benefit consultant. My mandate every week in hosting this show is to have experts like Stephanie come in, enlighten me, have people like you come in and give me real life conversation about boots on the ground. What's it like to work in your organization, and how can we fill and fit those needs? There's a lot of assumptions that can go on in my world. I would prefer not to have assumptions. I would prefer to build a benefit program that aligns with recruitment, that aligns with consulting, that aligns with that engagement portion, and to do better for my clients. That's my selfish plug, right? Is to work in the client's best interest. Really pleased to have Stephanie come back today and really have an engaging conversation about this great resignation, or great choice, great opportunity. Let's start, Stephanie, by taking a step back and tell us a little bit about the Lotus Group. Tell us a little bit about what you do and how you do it, what makes you different, and then we can delve in.
You know, I think that these conversations are really great to have. So my ask is, as I'm sharing stats or as we're conversing, if anyone wants to share anything, ask anything, play devil's advocate. Like, the more we converse and the more we know about these themes and these experiences that we're going through as a market together, I think the better we can do. So I'll maybe just share a couple stats. I'll share one that no one's heard yet. So one thing that we're hearing hugely from our client base is at Lotus, and I'll tell you quickly, we do recruitment, we do HR consulting, we have a Lotus industrial side of the business, we also have Lotus resume service side, and we also support clients with OH&S. So we're a multidisciplinary consulting group with 25 experts who are hyper-focused in Alberta, but we span from Vancouver to Halifax. And so we work providing clients with multidisciplinary people solutions for their businesses, typically focusing for the private sector and the not-for-profit sector. We do work with some public companies, but we really become like an extension of our clients' groups, adding additional horsepower to their HR operations. And so one of the things that we hear often right now, and Lori, it's one stat, is North America right now is short 80,000 long-haul drivers. Okay, so it sounds like, okay, Steph, what does that mean? Well, our food, our products, distribution, like the fact that our highways have a deficit of experienced drivers. Is it safe? We have a new wave of drivers that needs to come in to move logistics, to move services and products for our community. And we have a massive deficit. That's just one example in the labor shortage that we're facing right now. And when we think about that, it might not sound astronomical because this is a North American stat, but when we look at the demographics of the baby boomers also coming into retirement age, in addition to the new demographic, the younger millennials saying, I want more autonomy in my role. I don't want to be away from my family. I value these things. Like the impact to that specific profession and those businesses that need to pull resources into those roles to move product, that is number one huge discussion right now. So any logistics company, any companies that are heavy haul, anyone that's working out on the pipeline, transportation, oil and gas, moving many things, grocery, consumer packaged goods. So that's just one example. The other stat that's staggering, and it's a US stat, that I think as a North American, as a Western world, and what we're facing is, 4.5 million individuals resigned from their position in November 2021 in the US. 7.3% of Canadians aged 15 to 69, which is a huge portion, will leave their jobs in the next 12 months. And that was a stat that through Stats Canada that became relevant February of this year. So it sounds like a small number, but when you play it across that number of individuals, it's a huge impact to businesses. And so what I think the conversation is like, so what is happening? What does that mean? How are employees affected? How are employers affected? And what does this mean for even individuals that are staying in organizations, what is the cost of rehiring to organizations, and what are the reasons why people are looking for, to make a move? So a couple stats.
I don't know about everybody else in the room. And again, pipe up as you have questions. But I want to go back to the long hauler statistic of 80,000 in North America long hauler shortage. And you had mentioned about retirement and that, but where did the workers go? I can understand the great resignation or the transitioning or moving, and the great choice. But have we actually lost workers that are willing to work? Like have some segment of the population just removed themselves from being part of that population pool?
Well, I'd be curious to hear what some of the audience is hearing, but from a large scale across various industries on a candidate basis and also a client feedback basis, there are a lot of individual professionals, either in the professional or the industrial space, who are saying that they don't want to be, their values have shifted. And we see this day in and day out of individuals who have worked up in project environments, doing long rotations, saying no more. The COVID stopped me in my tracks, and my family is the most important thing. And so although I love my profession and I love what I do, I need to do it close to home now. And that is it's a staggering number, and it is really changing the landscape. It is also changing the landscape, Lori, like for employers to say, how do we not lose more of these individuals with these themes happening across our business? Do we go to an averaging agreement? Do we go to a salary plus a kicker? Do we go to day rates? Like, how do we ensure that we can keep people and retain them? And so I think that number comes from absolutely the retiring. A big wave of individuals across North America are in retirement years. And then there's that huge shift in demand and increase of a need for products. But also one of the big things in the labor change and the concern about our labor shortage is actually birth rates as well. So have come down quite a bit. And that's something that we don't talk about, but it's coming. And organizations and executives are seeing this, and they're quite concerned. How are we going to fill these labor gaps? And so there's a lot of interfering pieces that are a part of that equation. I don't think we can pick one thing and say it's exactly this one thing. It's all retirement. It's a big part of it, but it's a piece of that puzzle.
And that leads me to, and this is the way Stephanie and I typically roll, is, one thing leads to another. And again, feel free to unmute and carry in or chime in. But I'm wondering, you had said something really interesting, and especially with the drivers, right? People in the transportation industry. And you think about anybody here get an Amazon delivery in the last week, right? Okay. So we're not going to the retailers. So have retailers closed? I know if I go to my mall, it's a ghost town. It should be really a tourist attraction on what malls used to look like. Honestly, this is where people used to shop. So I'm seeing displaced workers, which could be your entry level, your high school, your first level get job experience workers that really don't have the opportunity to work now because the retail environment has been replaced by the online environment, which is then increasing the need for your drivers. So, building that understanding of how the different cogs of our economic wheel are playing into one another.
For me, I can really relate to a lot of what Stephanie is seeing as overall feedback. I think that, we've just kind of gotten our feet wet with consulting with businesses, but huge concerns are lying in female leadership development and male dominated industry. That's a big one that people are kind of looking at tackling alongside, working with the new demands that the millennial generation is gladly and happy to see bringing into the work environment to see some change. And I think a lot of people are kicking the can around about what to do next but no one's able to lead that conversation confidently because there isn't really a rule book yet on how do you restructure your business after a pandemic. So there's so much in the air, and there's so much opportunity to make change in so many different ways, not only for, you know, people that have been living such an extreme life inside their bubble for 2 years, but also for women in business. I think that that's a really great opportunity to redesign how you could model out how you can attract women in business and how you can retain their long-standing careers and that loyalty by providing them some really flexible autonomy type of opportunities alongside competitive wages, right?
And how do we know if we don't ask, right? It's
Yes.
and I think that falls into what you were saying, Jackie, is when you ask those strategic questions at those different parts of the career, and you take that information and you apply it, you action it, I think that creates that engagement. And that's why I love having Stephanie come in. I love chatting with Lissa and everybody, because we will only learn, to what you're saying, Kirsten, we'll only learn what that playbook is going to look like if we can have those open conversations here. Because Stephanie, what does it cost when we lose those employees? What's it costing the business in that lost employee to recruiting new?
So that's a fascinating question. And there are stats around that in 2022 in Canada, and they're quite scary. And the reality is as an organization, if you're top grading or you're shifting or you're losing individuals and you're like, yeah, you know, some clients will say, well, you know, 30% turnover, that's okay. But if they knew the stats, and if they knew prior to losing those employees that it would cost right now at a junior level 1.3, like their salary plus 30% to find that same person. At the mid-management level, it'd be around a 1.5. And at that more senior executive level, to replace those incumbents, it's costing companies 1.7. If companies knew that, I have a feeling they would do a lot of the work that would have helped them retain, engage, and help balance out their workforce. Because not only is it a cost, but it's a time spend. And it ends up costing them more internally, because if they don't refill those positions, or they learn through lost recruitment because they can't retain that same person because they've not done comp assessments, they don't understand that the market has changed. The market, like Cameron, you said, the pendulum has swung to an employer's market to an employee's market. So guess what? Joe that just left at the 90K range, to bring in Joe again, you're paying 110. And if they don't want to face that, recognize it, and stand in it, all of a sudden the rest of their internal workforce is handling Joe's role. So then what's happening, the trickle effect is everyone is burning out. And so we've done an unprecedented number of comp assessments for organizations that are feeling this burn and going, oh, we need to understand. We need to understand what it's going to take to keep people, because we can't go down this slippery slope. And it is literally, stats have said that it's, yeah, those numbers are real right now in Canada.
And if we ask and we don't action it, then we run the risk of losing that employee as well. So if we're doing an assessment and we are asking, what's it going to take to hire you? What's it going to take to keep you? What do you need right now? But there's no action from that. I think too, Stephanie, that, you know, when we're thinking about recruitment and we're thinking about retention, my clients will talk to me about pillars in their workplace. They'll say, you know what, in every layer of employee within our organization, they may have 3 layers, you know, middle, low, and high management, whatever, or they may have 17 or 24. But within each of those layers, there are pillar employees. And they know if they lose that pillar, they lose that leadership, they lose that communication. There's always the person that pipes up in the employee meeting. Tell me if anybody knows this person, right? But they could be that pillar that 3 other employees are relying on that person to ask the question that they wouldn't normally ask. So if that person's not there, what is the domino impact on that organization, and how do we measure for that, Stephanie?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think that I'll make one observation into that, because the measuring and the doing the due diligence to learn exactly, you know, what it is from a variability standpoint that your workforce values, so that you can ensure that you're keeping, you know, that as a situational leader, you can ensure that you're serving everyone in your group, or at least you're abreast of what's important to your group, and are they connected to the overall business objective and values, because that's important. But you know, one thing that I think I have to recognize for our HR professionals that are working in these organizations is many times there's one HR professional for 200 employees or more employees. So to ask, and this person is doing onboarding, they're doing recruitment, they're doing performance management, they're doing you know, conflict and resolution management, they're doing probably an administrative job that isn't actually filled. They're also doing, you know, strategic planning and dealing with the executive, and a lot of time troubleshooting. A lot of time I call them the internal psychologists. Like, they're really the meteorologist internally and knowing what the climate is. And then they're tasked with like, well, why is this happening? Are you doing exit interviews? Do you know? And doing engagement surveys, because we do these for clients. They're big undertakings. It takes design. It takes a lot of data collection. It takes a lot of strategic communication. And so I think, Lori, the question is, you know, how do we, when everyone's wearing 100 hats, how do we make sure that these things can happen internally? And as companies are truly companies are sprinting out of the pandemic to try to make up revenue that they lost, people are sprinting back to work trying to create a new norm, that they have a new norm at home now. It's like everyone has had to reinvent themselves, and we're all kind of broken and doing our best. And so it's like that whole, how do you build a bike while you're riding a bike, while you don't have a bike seat, while you know, there's this like paradox that's happening. And I think that that's where the gig economy has evolved, because people have said, oh, I can fill these gaps and I can do it from home, and companies need it because it's scalable and it's cost effective. And I think that what does that do? Draws more people out of the workforce. Why? Because people are, you know, they're honing their skills and then delivering that in a scalable solution to companies, so that while that can be tough for companies, it can also really help them. So hopefully that answers the question, but it's kind of a chicken and an egg paradox, and there's a lot of things going on there.
I'm still stuck on the bike seat. So don't sit down, right? Put your feet on the pedals, go forward, but don't sit down just yet, because there's no comfort to it. And I think that truly is right where Kirsten was saying, you know, we have to build what's going to work for the organization. And then perhaps that goes back to grassroots of what is the culture within that organization? What has been the historical culture? Can we identify our vision, our mission, our goal? Can we start the conversation there and say, this is the culture that we've had. This is how our culture has evolved over the last couple of years. We'd like you to be part of the weaving of our culture moving forward. And are you interested in helping us weave a new blanket, weave a new rug, we make a new bike that's going to be effective and is going to take into account exactly what you're saying, Stephanie, take into account those core work people based on their productivity and what you're expecting from them to do. And perhaps we're rounding out with that gig. Right?
Yeah. Well, it's the perfect example is slow adopting companies that saw the pandemic, and their mindset is, we went through the pandemic, now we go back to being who we were. Okay. No adoption, no agility, not innovative. Okay. This is a slow adoption. The impact will hit because we're seeing it. We get the calls. I'm supposed to go back to the office Monday. There's zero flexibility. And I have been more effective in my role for 2.5 years. Companies set a precedence, and now they've swung the pendulum. There's no discussion. I'm going back. So guess what we got from all of those people? Their resumes, and you know, and they are bold. There is conviction there. They're like, I had to homeschool my kid, do my job, look after them when they were sick. You know, I got COVID. My husband got COVID. My life could not stop. And I have learned that I'm a rock star and I can do this from home. And actually I can do it better. And then my employer won't even acknowledge that. Whoa, what happens there? I start looking, right? I go, okay, I know my value. And so this is this is totally happening. And then there's the fast adopting agile companies that are like, oh, hold on a second here. We don't need to remodel the office for more space post-pandemic because 25% of our people, based on KPIs, are 50% more productive. Do you think they want to work from home? Let's like send an engagement survey out. Let's like find out what matters to people. Maybe we could do a hybrid model. Maybe we could do a work share. Like, yes, it is more work to do that, but the outcome, it's like you're depositing into not only the professional, the emotional, the physical well-being, the mental well-being buckets of your people. You're likely, I think that impact for those companies we're already seeing. Their people are excited to come back in different capacities. They're excited about the new norm. They're excited about this new beginning, as opposed to feeling like the hammer is dropping on the slow adopting side. And industry
it really is a recognition of, if we were looking for engagement and looking to measure that engagement, if your company was able to sustain and perhaps do better in the last couple of years, then there's the opportunity for a recognition of staff that did the job well. And the whole go back, anybody who's heard me say that, as business owners, we can't go back. Like there's no going back. And what's really valuable now is that if we had tried in 2019 to have a more hybrid workforce, there weren't the government programs available to allow us as business owners to do that. Employment standards didn't recognize the unique needs that somebody working from home is going to have. OH&S has changed. All of these things have now changed to accommodate keeping what worked going forward. And that, to me, is such an opportunity for what you had said are the fast adopters, for that recognition, to getting to what you had said, Jackie, about meeting people where they are and retaining them over the long term. What do you see in the workforce for those fast adopters, Stephanie, in capitalizing on these opportunities?
Well, I mean, I think that when they have the benefit of the tech stacks to support a hybrid or model, and they can leverage that, I really believe it provides a sense of flexibility and autonomy. So they have to have strong performance management rigors in place, because the reality is that an individual can work very hard at home and in the office, but how is that success measured? So I think that that's one thing, is to have the right KPIs and the right tools to measure success, not as a micromanagement tool, but as a tool of recognition, ongoing development, and sort of education, as well as cross-training and best practice share. Because although someone may be working from home, they may have a best practice they're doing that you want to replicate across the company. So still, you need to have visibility as a group. The other thing that I think for fast adopters who have a dichotomy in their business where they can not have some companies, production, manufacturing, fabrication, people have to be boots on the ground. So even if the executive group is like so forward thinking, the reality is that I think where they can be agile and they can be ahead of the curve and they can be sort of best in practice, so to speak, is to understand with those production workers, those individuals that likely are lower on the pay scale, so every dollar matters actually to them even more, to take that so seriously, because they're the ones producing the widgets that are being sold, that are driving revenue, that are supporting the admin and the executive, but is like to really focus their efforts on engagement activities and understanding and retention strategies that could look like extra time off, productivity bonuses, supporting with commuting, like different incentives and way to incentivize their people outside of solely pay, but also to ensure that their pay is in a percentile that is equitable in the market, that is where it needs to be, and that they look at it from overall compensation standpoint. Example, I had a client lose 2 people 2 weeks ago, machinists. They walked down the street for $2 more an hour. Oh yeah, they were going. And guess what? They get to their new job and they're going to make $2 an hour more. And like in the trades, that is a lot. What they didn't get told, and what their last employer didn't do a good enough job of, was saying to them, your benefits are 100% paid here. And when you go to this new job, they're not. And they were never told that. So they went there, they were actually making less. So the other thing is, before companies change anything about their comp structure, do they understand it? Do they understand what their benefits, what their social strategy is with their group and what their pay is actually providing? And have they put it in a way that's valuable, understandable for their employees, so their employees can say, I work with the best employer. Like, I can, my son's insulin pump is covered a month, and I probably can't get that in 90 other jobs. These, like, do companies know what they're really providing? And do they even know utilization levels of those plans? So, like, for one instance, Lori, we talk a lot about, do companies know what they need from a benefit standpoint? And do they know what their employees are using? And do they know that that's actually a huge piece? Because lots of employers will say, it doesn't matter. It does matter when you're making when you're making, a certain amount an hour, and your employee is paying 50% of that benefit premium. It certainly matters. If they're,
you're in my wheelhouse now. For those of you that want to,
that's a plug for Lori, but it's very important.
Get my ripcord going. But that's absolutely true. If you look, because there is ways, and we do this for our clients, there are ways to say, okay, what are people claiming versus what's eligible on your plan versus what they're being reimbursed. Those are very distinctive numbers, and very often, for when we're looking at benefit plans, they'll look at what was eligible for pay and what was paid, but they're not looking at what's submitted. And the real gold in those hills are what is being submitted. What are we missing as part of that compensation tool? Because a benefit plan, in my opinion, is the promise kept from an employer to an employee, because in every ad you run, you say competitive salary, competitive benefits. Well, what makes your benefit competitive? And are you working with somebody who can show you that, right? So how does that work into the overall compensation? But to your point, Stephanie, and I think this will fit with you when you say doing things differently. We have a lot of companies that were never able to work remotely. We've talked about that in the past as well. They've always been boots on the ground. So one of the items that we've put in place that has really added value to the compensation is, it was unbelievable to me when we first started doing this, how many companies already offer a gas card. They offer a gas card for those in the construction zone, those in the trades, for going, or they have the fleet vehicles for those that are going back and forth to the job site. And one of the things that we were getting was, well, the employees never appreciate it. It's like, how, to your point, Stephanie, how are they communicating that? Are they utilizing a wellness plan, which means that your employees are going on via their phone into their benefit package, hitting the button, getting the gas card filled. And every time they're doing that, that is a hallmark ticket home to the company that says, my company values what I do, and part of my benefits is a gas card. You can do that, right? So if you have one HR person to 200 employees, does that not take that communication piece and make it just a little bit easier?
I think it sends a signal that your employer wants to listen, that you matter. I think any organization that recognizes that they're made up of humans, like we are their best assets, and can take a mindset that way. Absolutely, Lori, like everything, it is how it's communicated. And also another thing about the Great Resignation is inflation. So some individuals can't afford to make it to work. Like literally, they can't afford to put their child in daycare, to park downtown, to go and have it. Like at the end, it's like it's sort of like the surplus doesn't kind of get them out of the deficit that they've actually, done. And so I think that paying attention to those sorts of things, and actually at an organizational level, when you have an executive making a plan, actually understanding the challenges in each cohort of your business will help you to, like you said, Lori, to understand, like, what is it that in that wellness plan would fit with our customer service reps? What is it that would help our mechanics? What is it, that are going out to site? And, asking those kind of, maybe they look like challenging questions, but it's truly to sharpen your tools, to be able to say to them, like, here's the toolkit that we provide our entire company. Here's why we do this, because our people matter. and here's the tools we think would be more valuable to you, but let's ensure you understand the whole toolkit. Because my goodness, if we lose people because we didn't articulate what we had that we're paying for that they can't utilize, it's lost cost, like it's lost revenue, it's lost, it's time. It's so absolutely. And I think that
I like what you're saying there. I had an example come to mind from yesterday. So I had a client give me a call yesterday and say, so-and-so, one of our site supervisors wants to use his personal spending account, the wellness account, which we've set the budget. So it's like, we know we're going to spend that, right? That's the part of the spend. And we've told them they can use it to what makes them well, right? The health and wellness, the lifestyle. So this employee went to Costco and purchased a yard play set for his kids. Okay, so you may think as an employer, do I really want my employees spending their money that way? This employer said, absolutely, because he became back to the office today, and he's telling everybody how happy his kids are that the company allowed him to put something that brings them such joy. As mom and dad, they're happy. As an employee, he's talking it up to everybody. Did you know that's part of our benefit of working here? So when they're looking at that $2 an hour down the road, is $2 going to really compensate for the memories, the lifestyle, the happiness created in that moment?
Yeah, and that is, you bottle that, and that is communicated as a differentiator from your peers as an organization, right?
Yeah.
And it's a retention strategy. Absolutely. It goes back to managing. This is from Lissa. Absolutely, Lissa. Like every person we have has a plate of life and things that we don't even know they're going to experience. So how can we be nimble, agile, empathetic, and productive? Like that is why Lotus was born. Lotus was born out of necessity for me to be home to care for one of my children 24/7, and I couldn't do it working downtown. And our business is all about agility. And so, in a way, if companies look at it the same way to say we have a tough situation, but how can we leverage the challenge to bring about opportunities to create synergy and benefits out of, I always say blessings come from hardship, and truly challenges are opportunities.
Yeah.
It just depends on how you're looking at them. So I think right now we're in a challenging situation. A lot of companies are, and there's a lot of opportunities that we can look at.
But I wanted to circle back something Stephanie had said that comes to mind when you said about having multiple offers on your choice of employee, and how do you get that employee to choose you? One of the items to do is to look at who would be your second choice, because chances are your second choice will be other people's second choice as well. And you can be first in the door for that second choice, and they may be your more engaged employee because they've been given that opportunity first from you, so that they're not going down all the list of 10 and then having to bounce back up to the list of 10. So that is something to consider, because if we're building an engaged workforce, we really do want people that want to be there.
That's a great point. And for anyone who's in recruitment and onboarding, I know we have some HR professionals on the line, to ensure that as you're getting close to offer stage and you may go into multiple offers with other competitors, is that everyone is kept really warm, so that you're not having to bring someone back from disappointment. And it's just about, providing yourselves a little bit of time so that you don't, under promise, but sort of under promise and over deliver, so to speak. And I think that because at this point it is such a tricky situation. And also to help candidates, like even if you're talking to them, to say, if you're given an offer, please let us know. We're very interested. We're moving as fast as we can internally, and we'll expedite where we can. But sometimes it's a timing race, and that's not a good place to be in. That's not a nice place for even candidates to be put in, but it is happening right now. Yeah.
And I love Lisa's point too, that, transitioning perhaps the interview to a stay interview. What would it take to help you stay?
Yeah.
So instead of assuming that it's an exit interview, is there any opportunity to help you stay?
Can I clarify that?
Yeah.
Don't wait till they're leaving or thinking about leaving. Pick your pillar employees that you talked about earlier and take them out for lunch, have a conversation. Why do you stay here? What is the best thing about your job? How can we get other people in? And I think, right, that goes to collecting some of that information, communicating, knowing where you need to communicate, and knowing what those good things are from an employee standpoint, because I think a lot of times business owners and leaders make a lot of assumptions about what their people want, what their people need. And I think having those stay interviews starts to gives them the individual voice. So now they feel heard, they feel important. Back to Kirsten's thing with the millennials asking for things. They don't want anything different than any other generation. They are just way more bold about it, and they're not afraid to ask. And I love it, because that is what helps people be a better employer. And it also helps create those people first cultures that we all need.
I really appreciate everybody coming in today. Thank you so much for sharing. I know it's not easy. You get nervous and you don't want to put yourself out there, but we're always open, all of us, for I can speak for some of us in the room anyway. I know Stephanie and Lisa and I are open. If you wanted to have a conversation, that send us through an email, have a coffee, a get to know, take the conversation a little bit further. And I love how you put that, Stephanie, that we could have one HR person to 200 employees. So how can we hone those messages across the masses easy and create an avenue where certain pillars of our organization become the voice of our people in HR team? And we can do that by infusing the humor. We can do that through wellness accounts. We can do that through aligning the purpose of why we're here and get everybody's voices talking to everybody else. And that will create that engagement and retention. Thanks so much for coming in. It's always my favorite time of the week. I really hope that you'll come back again and that you saw some value and some takeaway nuggets for your own organizations.